Yo, what is up, guys? Stillboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, Errol Spence Jr. beats down, breaks down, and eventually stops Yordenis Ugas in the 10th round of their welterweight unification fight. Errol Spence Jr. now becomes the IBF, WBA, and WBC welterweight champion. And quite frankly, for the most part, this was a dominant display by Errol Spence Jr. And at times, I felt he looked rather good. First round was actually quite competitive. Both guys were trying to establish the jab, and both guys were finding the target. Not too many power shots landed in the first round. Errol Spence landed a good shovel hook to the body, and also a nice overhand left to the head. Ugas countered with a good body shot and landed a good overhand right. Round one was super close. I actually gave it to Yordenis Ugas. I felt he landed for slightly better quality shots, but round one could have gone either way. After round one, Errol Spence Jr. started to really up the pace, up the tempo, and as soon as Errol Spence did that from round two onwards, Yordenis Ugas could never really live with him in terms of punch output. Traditionally, Ugas is a counter-puncher, and that's what he was doing in this fight. He was never getting off first. He was waiting for Spence to overcommit or make a mistake, and he would throw the overhand right or his right uppercut or a hook. But primarily, he was shelling up and waiting for those opportunities, and as a result, Spence just started to work him over in the second round. The right hand of Errol Spence Jr. from that southpaw stance was magnificent on the inside. Right uppercut, right hook, turning around the target, creating angles for himself, landing some really good shots. Ugas would come back in the second round with some snappy counters, but Spence clearly won the second, and it was basically like that throughout the rest of the fight for the most part. Third round again, Ugas landed some good counters, but Spence outworked him. The shot that Ugas was primarily landing was his overhand right. I think he should have used the uppercut a lot more, because when Errol was leading, especially when he was leading with his left hand, he had the tendency to lean in, and I was calling for the uppercut from Yordenis Ugas, and even the uppercut on the inside. Ugas, he allowed Spence to dictate the real estate in this fight, and he allowed Spence to fight the fight where he wanted to, which was mid-range and the inside. Yeah, and if you do that, you have to fire back, and he wasn't doing that enough. Rounds 4 and 5 were pretty dominant rounds by Errol Spence, really working over Ugas, working the body. Some really good variety in his shots. Round 6 though, the fight actually got interesting. Spence started the round strongly once again, throwing more shots, being more aggressive, landing more shots. But in round 6, Ugas tried to throw the uppercut, which I was calling for. He missed, and it was like a cuffing shot, so it landed on the palm of the glove, and that knocked out Errol Spence Jr.'s mouthpiece, and inexplicably, Errol Spence just turned around to try and get the mouthpiece. Ugas took advantage and landed a right hand, and Spence was momentarily buzzed. I don't think he was as badly hurt as I initially thought, but he was definitely buzzed. So that was a rookie mistake by Errol Spence Jr. You have to protect yourself at all times. After the fight, Spence said he thought he heard the referee say stop, hence why he turned around, but Ugas didn't hear it, and he took advantage. And Spence was on unsteady legs for a few seconds, but Ugas didn't take advantage of it. Again, trying to play it safe, looking for that, for one perfect shot, being far too economical. But you could argue that Yordenis Ugas won the 6th round. But after the 6th round, Spence once again regained control, had a really good round 7, landed a series of right uppercuts and right hooks at the start of the round, which looked to buzz Yordenis Ugas. And at this point in the fight, Ugas's right eye, I think it was his right eye, one of his eyes anyway, it started to really badly swell. You could see that his legs were even slower than they were at the start of the fight. And he was a sitting duck for Errol Spence. And round 7 to 10, Spence just completely worked Yordenis Ugas all across the body, through the middle with uppercuts, right hook around the side of the guard, and that was a great shot by Spence, his right hook. It got around the high guard of Ugas, it got to the body, and we were saying that in the prediction video, the right hook for Spence against Ugas is going to be very, very key. I was saying that Ugas is very open to that shot, and that was the shot, in my opinion, that caused most of the damage in this fight. But yeah, Spence dominated round 7. I think the referee actually called for the doctor to look at Ugas's eye in round 8, I believe. They allowed Ugas to continue, but you could see that it was only a matter of time before, you know, the writing was on the wall. You know, Ugas was going to get stopped. He was taking far too much punishment. He actually landed a couple of good counters in the last couple of rounds of this fight. There was one shot that he really kind of caught Spence flush with, but Spence just walked through it. And yeah, round 10, it looked like Ugas could barely move his feet. He was taking a beating. The referee intervened, let the doctor look at the eye of Ugas, and then the doctor advised that the fight needs to be stopped, and that's what the referee did. So yeah, interesting fight. There were moments in this fight where Ugas landed some good shots, but he just went into that counterpuncher mode. He couldn't cope with Spence's output, and I worried about that going into this fight. He allowed Spence to dictate the real estate, and he was fighting like he was trying to land one big shot. So yeah, Spence just worked him over, outworked him, out-hustled him, beat him up, and then eventually stopped him. But I enjoyed this performance by Errol Spence Jr. To me, when Errol Spence is in control and really in form, when he's up close, when he's utilising that head control and banging away on the inside, I think there's no better sight in the welterweight division. I think Spence is the best to watch at welterweight. Is he the best though? That's the question. Listen, there were 2 left. It's down to the last 2 men standing, which is Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. And after the fight, Errol Spence Jr. in his post-fight interview called out Terence Crawford, saying that's the fight he wants next, it's the final belt, let's go. So, we are as close to this fight as we've ever been between Spence and Crawford. Hopefully something can be done, hopefully this fight can get signed, because if it does get signed, I think us boxing fans are going to lose our minds if it gets signed. And honestly, I'd like this fight to be in Texas. Spence draws out the crowds, it makes for a great atmosphere. It'd be amazing to have this fight in Texas. Fuck having everything in Vegas, again, you know, for these corporate guys. Have it in Texas, man. 60,000 people, whatever. That'd be amazing. But yeah, listen, considering what Spence has been through in the last few years, I thought he looked very good. He made some silly mistakes here and there, like in round 6. And occasionally he'd fall short with his left hand and get countered. Sometimes he was too over-eager, and he said that himself in his post-fight interview. But I think that's normal, considering how long he's been out. But yeah, I thought Errol Spence Jr. looked very good for the most part. There's a couple of errors here and there. But yeah, overall, he looked pretty good. As for Yordenis Ugas, he took a beating. And honestly, his performance has to be questioned. Because after a while, he should have known that the counterpunching is not going to work. He needs to mix things up. He needs to try to throw caution to the wind. Even if it means getting knocked out, he needed to change something up. He needed to roll the dice. But, he's got that Cuban style. I guess that's what we expect. I mean, he was similar in the Abel Ramos fight. He kind of let Ramos back into that fight. And, so I'm not surprised that this has happened or come from Ugas, this type of performance. But yeah, Errol Spence is now a 3-belt unified champion at welterweight. Share your thoughts below. What did you make of Spence's performance? What did you make of Ugas's performance? And what do you make of a potential Terence Crawford fight? Share your thoughts below. Peace.